Picture a world of green, green so deep and layered that it seems to breathe. Imagine yourself standing at the edge of a vast tropical forest, sometime near the end of the 7th century, around the year 692 by our calendar, though the people who live here count time in ways far older and more intricate than ours. The air is warm and heavy, rich with the scent of damp earth and blooming things. Somewhere, water is falling. You can hear it, not a roar, but a steady musical rushing, like the forest itself is exhaling. Before you, rising from the canopy of chiba and mahogany and sapodilla trees, are the white limestone peaks of temples and palaces, their surfaces bright against the green. This is Lakamha, the place of big water, and it is one of the most beautiful cities the ancient world will ever know. You may know it by the name later people will give it, Palenque, but to the people who live here, it is Lakamha, and the name tells you everything. Water is the city's heartbeat. Streams tumble down from the forested hills to the south. A river called the Otolam flows right through the center of the city, channeled beneath the main plaza through an arched stone aqueduct so ingeniously built that the water sings as it passes underground. Everywhere you listen, there is the sound of water, cascading over mossy rocks, pooling in carved stone basins, dripping from broad leaves after a passing cloud releases its burden. The city sits on a natural terrace of land perched above the flat jungle lowlands that stretch northward as far as the eye can see. On clear mornings, the view from the temple steps is like standing at the edge of the world, an ocean of treetops below and above, a sky so wide and blue it seems painted. On misty mornings, and there are many misty mornings here, the temples appear to float among the clouds, their white walls ghostly and luminous, as if they have always been here, as if they grew up from the stone of the earth itself. This is the place we will spend our time together tonight. We will live among its people for the turning of one full year, from the dry, warm days of late winter through the great rains of summer, and back again to the dry season. We will follow a handful of ordinary lives as they move through the rhythms of this city, and through these lives we will come to know what it felt like to be alive in this remarkable place, in this remarkable time. So let the world you know grow quiet. Let it fade, like a city disappearing into morning mist. And let us begin. It is a morning in the dry season, perhaps March by our reckoning, though the people of Lakamha would name this time by its position in the hub, their calendar of 365 days, 18 months of 20 days each, with 5 sacred and uncertain days at the end. The air today is warm, but not yet heavy. The rains are still months away, and the forest has a dry, golden quality, the leaves a little dusty, the streams running low and clear. Let us visit a courtyard home near the eastern edge of the city, not far from where the cultivated land gives way to the deeper jungle. The house is modest, walls of packed earth and pole, a thatched roof of palm fronds, swept clean and orderly. Around it, a small garden grows with herbs and squash. A few turkeys scratch in the shade. This is the home of a woman named K'inich Kan, which carries the meaning of something precious and yellow, like ripe maize, like the sun. She is perhaps 50 years of age, though she would not count her years as we do. She is a widow. Her husband passed some years ago, and her grown children live in the city proper. But K'inich Kan is not lonely. She is rooted here in this soil. Every morning, before the light fully arrives, Ixcan rises and goes to the hearth. She kneels before the 3 stones that cradle the fire. 3 stones, always 3, because in the stories the elders tell, the gods set 3 stones in the dark sky at the very beginning of creation, and every hearth fire is an echo of that first cosmic act. She blows the embers to life with a steady, practiced breath and feeds them with dry wood. Soon the flames are licking softly, and she places the clay comal over the heat, the flat griddle on which she will make tortillas. The maize has been soaking since the night before in water mixed with lime, a process that softens the kernels and releases their nourishment. Now she kneels at her grinding stone, the metate, and begins to work the softened corn into a smooth dough. The sound of the stone against stone is rhythmic, ancient, a gentle scraping and pressing back and forth that women in this part of the world have performed for thousands of years. It is a sound as familiar as breathing. Ixcan's hands are strong and sure. She shapes the dough into small rounds, pats them flat between her palms, pat, 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 and lays them on the hot comal, where they puff and brown and release a warm, toasted fragrance into the morning air. To the Maya, maize is not merely food. It is identity. It is the substance of the human body itself. In the sacred stories, the great epic that later generations will write down as the Popol Vuh, the gods tried 3 times to create human beings. First from mud, but the mud people dissolved. Then from wood, but the wood people had no hearts, no memory, no gratitude. Finally, the gods found white and yellow maize, and from its ground flesh they shaped the first true humans, beings who could think and speak and give thanks to their creators. Every time Ixcan grinds corn, she is, in a sense, reenacting creation. The maize feeds her body, which is itself made of maize. There is a beautiful circularity in this, a sense that human life and the life of the corn plant are not separate things, but one continuous cycle of giving and receiving. This is how the Maya understand the world, not as a line with a beginning and an end, but as a great wheel, turning and returning, each ending a new beginning. As the morning warms, let us leave Ixcan to her garden. She will be tending the squash today, pulling weeds, checking the small clay vessels she uses to collect water for her beehives, and drift toward the center of Lakamha, where the great stone buildings rise. The heart of the city is a series of plazas, courtyards, and temple pyramids arranged along the natural contours of the land. The palace, an enormous complex of connected buildings, galleries, and inner courtyards, dominates the center, its pale walls decorated with stucco reliefs of noble figures, gods, and flowing glyphs. A 4-story tower rises from one corner of the palace, unlike anything else in the Maya world, and from its upper rooms one can see the entire valley, the jungle, the distant plains, and at night the full sweep of the heavens. Nearby stand the Temple of the Inscriptions, the Temple of the Sun, the Temple of the Cross, and the Temple of the Foliated Cross. Each one a stepped pyramid crowned with a small temple at its summit, their roof combs rising like stone crowns against the sky. The walls inside these temples are covered with carved and painted panels of extraordinary intricacy, scenes of rulers and gods, columns of hieroglyphic text that record the history of the city, its dynasties, and its place in the vast architecture of Maya time. It is in one of the workshops near the palace that we find our second companion, a young woman named Sak, perhaps 20 years of age. Her name means something like white or bright, and it suits her. She is an apprentice painter and sculptor of stucco, one of the arts for which Lakamha is most celebrated. The stucco work here is extraordinary. Portraits of nobles and deities modeled in fine lime plaster, then painted in vivid reds, blues, yellows, and greens. It is delicate, detailed work that demands a steady hand, a sharp eye, and years of patient training. Sak comes from a family of artisans, not nobles, but not the lowest rank either. Her mother was a weaver of fine cloth, and her father, before he died, was a painter of ceramic vessels. She showed talent early and was taken on as an apprentice by a master sculptor, an older man we will come to know soon. In the Maya world, artistic skill is considered a kind of sacred gift. The word for scribe or artist in the ancient glyphs is itzaat, one who is skilled, one who possesses a certain wisdom of the hands. To create beautiful things is not merely craft, it is a participation in the same creative force that the gods use to shape the world. This morning Sak is in the workshop, a roofed but open-sided structure near the eastern gallery of the palace. The air smells of damp plaster and mineral pigments. On a low wooden table before her lies a section of prepared stucco, a smooth, pale surface the size of her forearm, which will eventually be mounted on the pier of a new building. She is practicing the shaping of a glyph, a date sign, one of the many that will form part of a longer text commemorating a ceremony. The work requires her to build up the plaster in thin layers, shaping each curve and line while it is still soft before it hardens in the warm air. She works slowly. Her fingers are stained with white plaster and traces of red pigment. Nearby, small clay pots hold ground minerals, cinnabar for red, a deep precious red the color of heart's blood, Maya blue, made from a combination of indigo and a rare clay, luminous and enduring, yellow ochre from the earth itself. These colors will not be applied until the modeling is complete, but Sak likes to have them near her while she works. They are a kind of promise, a glimpse of what the finished piece will become. Her teacher arrives. His name is Akuhun, a title more than a name, meaning something like keeper of the sacred books. He is a man of perhaps 60 years, thin and quiet, with deep lines around his eyes and hands that shake slightly now, but can still coax astonishing detail from a piece of wet plaster. He has been a scribe and artist his entire adult life. He has painted codices, the great folding books made of bark paper, covered in columns of glyphs and pictures. He has carved stone panels. He has shaped the faces of gods from plaster. And now, in his later years, his greatest work is his students. He approaches Sak's workbench and studies her glyph without speaking. Then, gently, he takes a small wooden tool and makes the faintest adjustment to one curve, a line that was almost right but not yet breathing. He does not explain what he did or why. He simply hands her back the tool and moves on. This is how teaching works here. Not through lectures, but through presence, through watching, through the slow accumulation of 10,000 small corrections until the hand knows what the mind cannot yet articulate. Sak studies the adjustment. She sees it. The way that one corrected line made the entire glyph come alive, gave it a sense of motion and weight it didn't have before. She nods to herself and begins again on a fresh piece of plaster, carrying the lesson in her fingers. Now let us drift upward, up the steps of the Temple of the Cross, where the air grows slightly cooler and the sound of the city fades to a murmur below. In one of the upper chambers, seated on a woven mat with a codex spread before him, we find a young man named K'awil. He is perhaps 22, from a noble family. His father is a minor lord, a counselor to the Ahau, the great king. K'awil's name means something like powerful one, or refers to a lightning deity, but there is nothing thunderous about him. He is quiet, thoughtful, with a slightly distracted air of someone who is always calculating something in his head. K'awil is an apprentice astronomer, or rather, in the Maya understanding, he is training to become an Kin, a keeper of the days, a priest-scholar whose duty is to observe the movements of the heavens and maintain the great calendars that govern the life of the city. The Maya do not separate what we might call astronomy from what we might call religion. To watch the stars is to read the intentions of the gods. The sky is a text, and the planets are its glyphs, and those who can read them hold one of the most important forms of knowledge in the Maya world. This morning, K'awil is reviewing a record of Venus, Noek, the great star, or Chak-ek, the red star, the celestial body that the Maya have tracked with extraordinary precision for centuries. They have calculated that Venus completes one full cycle, rising as the morning star, disappearing, reappearing as the evening star, and disappearing again in 584 days. The actual figure, as modern astronomers will one day confirm, is 583.92 days. The Maya are off by less than 2 hours over the course of nearly 2 years. This is naked-eye astronomy, achieved without telescopes, without lenses, only patient observation, generation after generation, and a mathematical system so sophisticated that it includes the concept of zero, a concept that much of the world has not yet discovered. K'awil's teacher has given him a task: to compare the current position of Venus in the evening sky with the records of its position one full cycle ago, and to note any discrepancy. The Maya know that their canonical cycle of 584 days accumulates a small error over time, and they have developed correction methods, subtle adjustments built into their tables, that keep the calendar aligned with reality across decades and centuries. It is painstaking work, but K'awil finds it deeply satisfying. There is something in the regularity of the heavens that calms him, the knowledge that Venus will always return, that the sun will always find its way back from the underworld, that the great cycles will continue to turn. He rolls the codex carefully, a long strip of bark paper, folded like an accordion, its surface covered in neat columns of dots and bars, the Maya number system, where a dot equals 1 and a bar equals 5, and carefully drawn glyphs. Then he rises and walks to the doorway of the temple chamber, where the view opens up to the west. The sun is climbing now, but tonight, if the sky is clear, Venus will be there, bright and steady above the tree line, the first light to appear as the day fades. He stands for a moment, looking out at the green world below. From here, he can see the steam rising from the jungle as the morning sun warms the damp canopy. He can hear the distant cry of a howler monkey, a deep, resonant sound, almost like the roar of some great cat echoing through the trees. He can see, far below, the tiny figures of people moving through the plazas, going about their morning work. And though he does not know it, cannot know it, he can see, very faintly, the thin plume of smoke rising from Ixcan's hearth at the edge of the city where she is finishing her tortillas and beginning her day. The dry season stretches on. The days are long and bright. The streams run low and the forest floor crackles underfoot. But in the Maya calendar, another kind of time is passing too. The ritual calendar, the Tzolk'in, with its cycle of 260 days, each one a unique combination of a number and a name, each one carrying its own character and meaning. The Tzolk'in does not correspond to any astronomical cycle we can identify. Some scholars believe it may be linked to the human gestation period, roughly 260 days from conception to birth, which would make it a calendar of human life itself, each day a step in the journey from seed to being. The Hab and the Tzolk'in interlock like two great gears turning together, creating a cycle of 18,980 unique days, roughly 52 years, before the same combination repeats. The Maya call this the calendar round, and it is the rhythm of everyday life. But beneath it lies an even deeper count, the long count, a continuous record of days stretching back to a mythical creation date more than 3,000 years before this morning. A date when, the stories say, the gods set 3 stones in the sky, lit the first cosmic fire, and raised the world tree that holds up the heavens. Time to the Maya is not a river flowing in one direction. It is a living, breathing thing, cyclical, layered, sacred. Every day has a character. Every period has a meaning. And the people whose job it is to understand these cycles, the Akin, the day-keepers, are among the most respected members of Maya society. The weeks pass gently. Let us drift forward now as the dry season softens and the air begins to change. You can feel it before you see it, a heaviness in the atmosphere, a thickening. The afternoons grow hotter. The insects grow louder, their chorus swelling as the humidity rises. The forest seems to lean forward, expectant. And then, one afternoon, perhaps in late May, the sky darkens with a speed that still has the power to astonish. Great towers of cloud build above the mountains to the south, purple and gray and shot through with veins of light. The wind rises carrying the smell of rain, that unmistakable scent of water on dry earth, green and electric and ancient. And then the rain comes. It comes not gently, but in a great warm rush, a downpour so dense that the world beyond arm's length disappears into a gray curtain of water. The sound is immense, a roaring on the thatch roofs, a drumming on the stone plazas, a rushing in every channel and gutter as the water finds its way downhill. Within minutes the streams that had been low and clear are swollen and brown. The Ottalam River churns through its aqueduct beneath the plaza. Waterfalls that had thinned to trickles during the dry months suddenly come alive again, cascading down the hillsides in white ribbons. The city of Big Water earns its name. For the people of Lakamha, the rains are both blessing and challenge. They are the lifeblood of agriculture. Without them, the maize will not grow, and without maize, there is nothing. The milpa fields in the surrounding countryside, plots cleared from the forest using the ancient method of slash and burn, where the trees are felled and burned and the ash enriches the soil, have already been prepared and planted. The seeds were placed in the ground weeks ago. At the time the Akin declared auspicious, when the calendar and the stars and the signs of the earth all aligned. Now the farmers watch the sky and wait for the rain to wake the seeds. Ixkan knows rain the way she knows her own heartbeat. She has watched more than 40 rainy seasons come and go. She knows which plants thrive in the first downpours and which need the steadier, gentler rains of midsummer. She knows that the squash will spread its great flat leaves across the garden floor, shading the soil and keeping it moist. She knows that the bean vines will climb the corn stalks, the three sisters, as they are sometimes called, maize and beans and squash growing together in a relationship of mutual support, each one giving what the others need. She speaks to her plants, not in any formal way, not as prayer exactly, but as conversation, the way one speaks to a neighbor with familiarity and respect. In her understanding of the world, the plants are alive in a way that goes beyond what we might mean by the word. They are persons, in a sense. They have spirits. The maize, especially, is sacred. It is the flesh of the gods, the flesh of humanity, and it deserves to be addressed with gratitude. The rainy season transforms the city. The white limestone of the temples, which gleamed so brightly in the dry months, now takes on a softer, grayer tone, its surfaces slick with water and furred with the first growth of moss. The jungle, already impossibly green, deepens to an almost supernatural lushness. Orchids bloom on the branches of the tallest trees. Frogs begin their nightly chorus, a sound so vast and layered that it seems to come from the earth itself, a living pulse beneath the rain. In the workshop near the palace, Iksak adjusts her work to the rhythm of the season. Stucco does not cure well in heavy rain. The moisture in the air prevents the plaster from setting properly, so the wet months are a time for other kinds of work. She practices drawing on sheets of bark paper using fine brushes made from bundles of hair. She copies the glyphs from older texts, working to perfect the flowing, curving lines that make Maya writing one of the most beautiful scripts the world has ever produced. Each glyph is a small picture, part sound, part meaning, part art. To write in Maya is to draw and to speak at the same time, and the best scribes are those who can make each glyph not merely legible, but beautiful, imbuing the text with a visual rhythm that mirrors the rhythm of the spoken language. Aku Hun, her teacher, uses the rainy days for something he calls teaching through stories. He gathers his small group of apprentices. There are 4 of them, Iksak the most advanced, in the covered gallery, and he tells them the old stories, not as entertainment, though they are entertaining, but as instruction, because the stories contain the patterns, the shapes, the movements, the relationships between figures that an artist must know by heart before they can create meaningful work. He tells them of the hero twins, Hunahpu and Palenque, who descended into Xibalba, the underworld, and outwitted the lords of death through cleverness and courage. He tells them of the maize god, the beautiful young deity who was sacrificed and buried and who rose again from the earth as the first corn plant. A story of death and resurrection that the Maya see enacted every year in the cycle of planting and harvest. He tells them of the great world tree, the Wakachan, whose roots reach down into the underworld and whose branches hold up the sky, and in whose shade all life takes shelter. As he speaks, his hands move, unconsciously perhaps, or perhaps very deliberately, tracing the shapes of the figures in the air. the curve of the maze god's profile, the spiral of a serpent's body, the geometry of the world tree's branches. The apprentices watch his hands as much as they listen to his words, because in those gestures are the templates for everything they will ever paint or carve. Iksak listens carefully. She has heard these stories before, many times, but each telling reveals something new, a detail she missed, a connection she hadn't seen. She notices how Akuhun's voice changes when he speaks of the maze god. It grows quieter, more reverent. This is not just a story to him, it is truth. The maze god's death and rebirth is not a metaphor, it is the fundamental reality of the universe. Everything dies and is reborn, the corn, the seasons, the great calendar cycles, even the world itself, which the Maya believe has been created and destroyed several times before this current age. There is comfort in this, Iksak thinks. Nothing is ever truly lost. Everything returns. Meanwhile, Kawil has been watching the skies with a different kind of attention. The rainy season makes naked-eye astronomy difficult. Clouds obscure the stars for weeks at a time. But it is also the season when certain observations become possible. The Maya are deeply interested in the points on the horizon where the sun rises and sets, and these positions shift throughout the year. During the rainy season, the sun reaches its northernmost point, the summer solstice, and then begins its slow journey back toward the south. Kawil and his fellow apprentices have been tasked with observing the sunrise from a specific point on the steps of the palace tower, noting the position against the distant tree line, and recording any deviation from the expected position. It is tedious work, made more so by the clouds. Many mornings Kawil climbs the tower steps before dawn, only to find the eastern horizon swallowed by gray. He sits and waits anyway, because that is the discipline. Sometimes the clouds part for just a moment, a brief window of gold, and in that moment the position of the sun can be noted. Other mornings there is nothing, and he descends the steps in the gray light, his bark paper still blank. But the discipline itself has value. His teacher, an elderly Akin with a rasping voice and an extraordinary memory for numbers, has told him that the sky rewards patience. The universe is not hiding from you, the old man says. It is waiting for you to be still enough to see. It is during one of these rainy season mornings that Kawil and Iksak first truly speak. They have seen each other before, of course. Lakamha is not a vast city, and the world of scribes and priests and artists is a small one within it. But on this particular morning, they are both sheltering from a sudden downpour under the same stone overhang near the northern gallery of the palace. The rain comes down in sheets, turning the plaza into a shallow lake. They are the only two people foolish enough, or dedicated enough, to have been out this early. Kawil has his bark paper and his calculating sticks. Iksak has a clay pot of pigment she was carrying to the workshop. They stand in the gray-lit silence, watching the rain, and after a while Kawil speaks. He mentions the date, today's position in the Tzolk'in, the sacred calendar, and Iksak recognizes it as the glyph she was practicing just yesterday. She mentions this, and he is interested. He asks to see how she draws it. She traces the shape in the wet stone with her finger, the round day sign cartouche, the number above it in dots and bars, and he nods, seeing in her drawing the same number he has been calculating in his tables. It is a small moment, a shared recognition that they are working on different faces of the same great jewel. She sees the beauty in the glyphs. He sees the mathematics. And for the first time, each catches a glimpse of what the other sees, a flash of understanding, like a break in the clouds revealing the sun. The rain continues. They talk a little longer, about nothing of great consequence, and then it eases, and they go their separate ways. But something has shifted, the way the air shifts after rain, imperceptible, but real. The rains deepen. June becomes July, July becomes August, and the world is saturated. The jungle is at its most alive now, a riot of growth, every surface furred with green, every branch heavy with leaf and flower and fruit. The air is thick enough to taste, warm and wet and fragrant with the smell of growing things, the sweet rot of fallen fruit, the sharp green scent of broken stems, the deep earthy perfume of soil that has been wet for weeks. The birds are everywhere. Toucans with their great colorful beaks perch in the ceiba trees. Scarlet macaws cross the sky in pairs, their long tails streaming behind them like banners. In the understory, motmots swing their pendulum tails in slow, hypnotic arcs. And from the deepest parts of the jungle comes the voice of the howler monkey, that extraordinary sound, somewhere between a roar and a groan, that carries for miles through the wet forest, a sound so primordial that it seems to come from the beginning of the world. Let us check on our farmer, K'inich Kan. She is thriving in the rainy season, despite the damp and the mud and the mosquitoes. Her garden is producing abundantly, squash and beans and chili peppers, tomatoes and herbs. Her beehives are busy, and she will have honey to trade at the market. But her greatest attention is reserved for her maize. The stalks are tall now, taller than she is, their broad green leaves unfurling in the rain. The ears are forming, tight bundles wrapped in pale green husks. She walks among them each morning, running her hands along the stalks, feeling for health, for strength. When she finds a stalk that is growing crooked, she speaks to it gently, encourages it, the way one might encourage a child learning to stand. It is in the market that the different layers of Lakamha's society come together. The market is held on certain days of the calendar in a large open plaza near the northern edge of the main ceremonial center. Farmers like K'inich Kan bring their produce, maize, beans, squash, chili, cotton, tobacco, honey. Artisans bring their wares, pottery, woven cloth, carved jade ornaments, obsidian tools, and from farther away traveling merchants arrive with goods that cannot be found locally. Quetzal feathers from the highlands of Guatemala, jade from the Motagua Valley, obsidian from the volcanic regions, and most prized of all, cacao, the small brown beans from which the Maya make their sacred chocolate drink. One such merchant comes to Lakamha regularly during the rainy season, when the rivers are high enough to carry the heavy trade canoes. His name is K'inich Bahlam, a man of middle years, lean and weather-browned from years on the river roads. He has traveled to places most people in Lakamha will never see, the great city of Tikal, deep in the Peten jungle to the east, with its towering temples that rise above the canopy like stone mountains. The sprawling trade center of Calakmul to the north, Lakamha's old rival, the highland cities where the air is cool and the volcanoes smoke on the horizon. He carries not only goods but stories, and in the market people gather around him to listen. K'inich Bahlam tells of the wonders of distant cities, a stela he saw at Copan, carved so finely that the faces of the lords seemed alive. A ball court at Tikal so large that the sound of the rubber ball striking the stone walls echoed like thunder. He tells of new styles of pottery he saw in the eastern cities, new patterns of weaving from the highlands, and he brings news. Which alliances are strong, which cities are building, which Kin have made new discoveries about the movements of the stars. When he speaks of the stars, Kawil listens closely. Kawil has come to the market this morning not for cacao or cloth, but for knowledge. He has heard that the astronomers at Copan, far to the southeast, have been making observations of the moon that differ slightly from the records kept at Lakamha. He wants to know more. Are the Copan astronomers using a different method of counting the lunar cycle? Are they measuring from the first visible crescent or from the last visible crescent? These are not trivial questions. The difference affects the accuracy of the eclipse tables, and the eclipse tables are among the most important predictive tools the Maya possess. Yaks Bolon does not have the technical knowledge to answer Kawil's questions in detail, but he has a merchant's memory for what he has seen and heard, and he describes a stone monument at Copan that contains lunar data Kawil has not encountered before. Kawil makes careful note of this on a strip of bark paper. He will bring it to his teacher. Perhaps one day he will make the journey to Copan himself. The market is also where Ixcan and Ixsac cross paths. Ixcan has known Ixsac since the girl was small. Their families are distantly connected, as many families are in a city this size. Ixcan was a friend of Ixsac's mother, the weaver, and she remembers the day, years ago, when she first saw the child drawing figures in the mud with a stick. Not childish scrawls, but careful, deliberate shapes that already showed the instinct of an artist. Today, Ixcan has brought a basket of chili peppers and a small pot of honey, and she offers some to Ixsac, who accepts with warmth and thanks. They stand together for a while, watching the bustle of the market, and Ixcan asks about Ixsac's work. How is the apprenticeship going? Is old Akuhun treating her well? And Ixsac speaks with quiet pride about a project she has been given, her first real commission, not just practice work. She has been asked to help paint a section of the new temple that is being built on the southern edge of the ceremonial center. It is a small section, a border pattern of water lilies and serpents, but it is real. It will be there long after she is gone. It will be part of Lakamha itself. Ixcan smiles and places a hand briefly on the young woman's arm. She does not say much. She is not a woman of many words, but her eyes say what words cannot. She is proud. She remembers that girl in the mud drawing shapes. And now look. As the rainy season reaches its peak, the ceremonial life of the city intensifies. The Maya calendar is not merely a way of counting days. It is a guide for action, a sacred schedule that tells the people when to plant, when to harvest, when to celebrate, when to pray. Certain days require certain rituals, and the Akin and the Aja, the king and his priests, are responsible for performing them. Incense is burned, great clouds of fragrant copal resin, a tree sap that produces thick white smoke with a rich, piney, slightly sweet scent. The smoke is an offering, a vehicle for prayer. It carries the words and intentions of the people upward to the gods. Kawil participates in these ceremonies as part of his training. He stands in the dim, smoky interior of the temple, holding a censer, a clay vessel shaped like a divine face from which the copal smoke pours. The chanting of the priests fills the small stone chamber. a low, rhythmic sound that seems to resonate in the bones. The walls, painted with images of gods and celestial symbols, flicker in the light of the fire. For a moment, in the smoke and the chanting and the firelight, the boundary between the human world and the divine seems very thin, as if one could reach through it, as if the gods are just on the other side, listening. This is not superstition, not to Kawil, not to any of them. It is lived experience. The Maya inhabit a world in which the sacred is not separate from the everyday. It is woven through it, the way water is woven through Lakamha, present everywhere, always moving, always sustaining. Let us drift forward again. The rains are easing now. October brings a gradual softening of the downpours. They come less often, less fiercely, and between them the sky opens into long, clear evenings. This is the most beautiful time of year for stargazing. The air is washed clean by the final rains. The humidity drops just enough to sharpen the edges of things, and the night sky over Lakamha blazes with a brilliance that most modern people will never experience. No electric lights, no pollution, nothing between the eye and the stars but clear, warm air. Imagine that sky. Imagine stepping out into a courtyard at nightfall and looking up and seeing the Milky Way, the Wakachan, the great world tree, stretched across the sky in a river of light so dense and luminous that it casts faint shadows on the ground. Imagine seeing not dozens of stars, but thousands, tens of thousands, a dome of light so rich and deep that it seems three-dimensional, as if you could reach up and push your hand into it and feel the cool dust of distant suns between your fingers. This is Kawil season. These long, clear nights are when the most important work of the Akin takes place, and it is now, several months into their acquaintance, that Kawil finds an excuse to invite Iksak to the observation platform. It is not, strictly speaking, a place for non-astronomers, but Iksak has been working on a painted panel that requires accurate depictions of celestial symbols, the glyph for Venus, the glyph for the moon, the number signs used in the long count, and Kawil reasons that she should see the actual sky, should understand what the symbols refer to. It is a valid reason. It also happens to be the reason he gives to his teacher, who raises an eyebrow but does not object. They climb the steps of the tower as the last light fades from the western sky. The stone is still warm from the day's sun. The air smells of wet stone and night-blooming flowers, jasmine, perhaps, or the sweet white blossoms of a jungle vine. From the forest below, the evening chorus of frogs and insects rises in a vast, layered symphony, a wall of sound that is somehow not loud but deep, felt as much as heard, a vibration in the chest. And then the stars come out. First Venus, No-Ek, the great star, appearing in the western sky like a small fierce lamp, so bright it seems to pulse. Then, as the sky deepens from blue to black, the other stars emerge, tentatively at first, the brightest ones, and then in a flood, until the entire dome of the sky is alive with light. Kawil points out the constellations. The Maya do not see the same patterns in the stars that the Greeks or the Egyptians see. They have their own map of the sky, their own figures. There is a scorpion, similar to the western Scorpius. There is a peccary, a wild pig of the jungle, and a turtle and other animals that populate the Maya cosmos. The ecliptic, the path that the sun and planets travel across the sky, is particularly important. The Maya have identified 13 constellations along this path, a zodiac of their own, each associated with an animal and a set of meanings that the Akin use in their calculations and predictions. Kawil explains all this to Iksak, and she listens with the particular quality of attention that artists have, not just hearing the information but seeing it, translating it immediately into shapes and relationships. She looks at the Scorpion constellation and sees how the curve of its tail echoes the curve of the serpent she has been painting. She looks at the Milky Way and sees the world tree, the Waka Chan, and understands, for the first time viscerally rather than intellectually, that the world tree is not just a story. It is there. She can see it, painted in light across the sky. Kawil watches her face as she looks up, and what he sees there is something he recognizes, the same wonder he felt years ago when his teacher first took him to the observation platform, and he saw the sky not as a beautiful backdrop, but as a text, a language, a message from the gods written in fire. He sees that wonder reflected in her eyes, and something in him shifts, quietly, like a star moving imperceptibly across the sky. They stay on the platform for a long time. He shows her Venus and explains its cycle, how it appears as the evening star for roughly 263 days, then disappears behind the sun for about 50 days, then reappears as the morning star for 263 more days, then disappears again for about 8 days before returning as the evening star. The entire cycle takes 584 days, and 5 of these cycles, 2,920 days, align almost perfectly with 8 solar years. This is not a coincidence, Kawil explains. It is a harmony, a rhythm built into the very structure of the cosmos. The Maya have used this harmony to build their Venus tables, which can predict the planet's appearances and disappearances with extraordinary accuracy. Iksak thinks about this. 5 cycles of Venus equal 8 years of the Sun. It is a ratio, 5 to 8, and ratios are something she understands instinctively because they are the foundation of visual harmony. The proportions of a well-designed temple, the spacing of glyphs on a panel, the relationship between the size of a figure and the space around it. These are all ratios, and now she learns that the same principle governs the movement of the planets. The cosmos, it seems, is designed with the same care as a painted panel. Or perhaps it is the other way around. The painted panel is a reflection of the cosmos. She mentions this to Kawil, and he is startled and delighted. He has never thought of it quite this way, from the artistic side. In his training, the emphasis has always been on numbers, on accuracy, on prediction. But Iksak is showing him something else, that the numbers are beautiful, that the precision of the cosmos is not merely useful but moving, the way a perfectly shaped glyph is moving, the same deep satisfaction of something being exactly right. Below them, the city sleeps. Fires burn low in the courtyard homes. The sound of the frogs and insects fills the warm night air, and above them, the stars continue their slow, ancient rotation, the same rotation they performed 1,000 years before this night, and will perform 1,000 years after it. In the weeks that follow, Kawil and Iksak find more reasons to cross paths. He brings her astronomical data, the positions of planets, the dates of solstices, that she incorporates into her painted panels with new accuracy and depth. She shows him her work, and he sees the numbers he has calculated transformed into something visual, something that communicates not just information but feeling. They are together more than either is alone. His precision gives her art its authority. Her beauty gives his numbers their meaning. Old Akuhun watches this collaboration with quiet satisfaction. He has seen this before, the way that knowledge, when it is shared between minds that think differently, becomes something greater. He remembers his own youth, his own collaborations, and he smiles. The knowledge is being passed. The cycle continues. The rains are gone now. November has brought dry, warm days and cool nights, and the forest is beginning its slow transformation. Not a dramatic autumn like the temperate forests of the north, but a subtle shift in color and texture, a slight paling of the canopy, a drying of the forest floor. The streams run clean and clear again, musical over their stones, and the maize is ready. K'inich Kan has watched her corn through every stage of its life, from seed to sprout, to tall green stalk, to the gradual drying and browning that signals maturity. The ears are full and heavy now, the kernels hard and golden beneath their papery husks. The harvest is a communal effort. Families from the surrounding area come together to help each other in the fields, and the work, though physical and demanding, carries a feeling of celebration. The maize has come through. The gods have been generous. The cycle has turned. K'inich Kan works alongside younger women, her movements slower but no less sure. She shows them how to read the ears, how to tell by the feel of the husk and the weight of the ear whether the corn is truly ready or needs another day. She shows them how to select the best ears for next year's seed, always choosing the largest, the most perfectly formed, because the quality of next year's crop depends on the wisdom of this year's selection. This is knowledge that was passed to her by her mother, and to her mother by her grandmother, and so on, back through generations beyond counting. Each harvest is an act of remembrance. In the evening, after the day's work, there is a meal. The women have prepared a feast from the first of the new maize, fresh tortillas, tamales wrapped in corn husks and filled with beans and chili, and atole, a warm, thick drink made from ground corn and flavored with honey. There is also chocolate, cacao, the sacred drink of the Maya, prepared from roasted cacao beans ground into a paste and mixed with hot water, chili, and sometimes vanilla or ground flowers. The liquid is poured from one vessel to another, back and forth from a height, until it develops a thick layer of foam on the surface. This foam is the most prized part. It is considered the spirit of the chocolate, the place where its essence resides. The drink is bitter and rich and complex, nothing like the sweet chocolate of the modern world, and it is served in special painted vessels, each one a work of art. As the evening darkens and the fire burns low, an elder, a man even older than Akuhun, begins to speak. He tells the story of the maize god, and it is the right story for this night, because the harvest is the moment when the story comes alive. The maize god was beautiful, the elder says, the most beautiful of all the gods. And he was killed, and his body was buried in the earth. But from his buried body the first corn plant grew, and when the people harvested it and ground the corn and shaped it into dough, the maize god was reborn in the flesh of human beings. We are made of his body, the elder says. When we eat the corn, we take him into ourselves. When we plant the seed, we return him to the earth so he can be reborn again. There is no death, not truly. There is only the turning. The fire crackles. The elder's voice is low and rhythmic. The listeners, farmers and artisans and priests, old and young, sit in the warm darkness and let the story settle into them the way rain settles into soil. Iksak is there and Kawil is there, sitting near each other, not quite touching but close enough that each is aware of the other's warmth in the cooling evening air. And Ixcan is there, her hands folded in her lap, her eyes reflecting the firelight. She does not need to hear the story. She knows it in her bones, but she likes the hearing of it, the way the elder's voice carries it, the way the words fill the space between the fire and the stars. In the days after the harvest, a great ceremony takes place in the main plaza. The Ahau, the king of Lakamha, presides, though we observe him only from a distance, as the common people do. He appears at the top of the temple of the Inscriptions in full regalia, a towering headdress of quetzal feathers, jade ornaments at his throat and wrists, a cape of jaguar skin. He is not merely a political leader, he is the intermediary between the human world and the divine. His body is the axis, like the world tree, that connects the three realms, the heavens above, the earth, and Xibalba, the underworld below. Copal incense rises in great plumes from the temple platforms. Musicians play, clay flutes that produce a breathy, haunting tone, drums made from hollowed logs and covered with deer hide, turtle shell rattles, and the deep, resonant sound of conch shell trumpets that echoes off the stone buildings and rolls across the valley. The music is not melodic in the way we might expect. It is rhythmic, repetitive, trance-inducing, designed not to entertain, but to open a doorway between worlds. Kawil participates in the ceremony as an assistant to the Akin. He helps maintain the sacred fire, tends the censers, and hands forward the offerings, jade beads, cacao beans, drops of the king's own blood drawn from a ritual lancet. Blood, to the Maya, is the most sacred substance. It contains the chulel, the life force, the spark of the divine. When the king offers his blood, he is feeding the gods, sustaining the cosmic order, ensuring that the cycles will continue to turn. It is not a violent act in the Maya understanding. It is an act of reciprocity, the most generous gift one can give. From the edge of the plaza, Iksak watches the ceremony with the eyes of an artist. She notes the way the incense smoke curls and rises against the dark stone, the way the quetzal feathers in the king's headdress catch the firelight, iridescent green, impossibly bright, shifting with each movement like living things. The way the faces of the carved gods on the temple walls seem to come alive in the flickering light, their stone eyes watching the proceedings with patient, ancient attention. She will paint this, not today, not tomorrow, but someday. She will find a way to capture this, the smoke, the light, the sense of something vast and sacred just at the edge of perception. And Ixcan watches from even farther back, among the farmers and laborers, the women with baskets and the men with calloused hands. She does not need to be close. She can feel the ceremony in the ground beneath her feet, in the vibration of the drums, in the smoke that drifts across the plaza and wraps around her like a shawl. She closes her eyes and breathes it in. The copal, the night air, the distant jungle. She has stood here for so many ceremonies, so many turnings of the year, each one the same and each one different, each one a reminder that she is part of something much larger than herself, larger than any of them, a great river of time and life that has been flowing since the gods set the three stones and lit the first fire. And now the year is turning toward its close. December, January. The dry season returns. The air grows warm and still, and the forest takes on that golden, dusty quality again. The streams run low. The mornings are fresh and clear, and in the workshops and the temples the work continues. Sak has grown. It is visible in her work, a sureness in her line that was not there a year ago, a confidence in her use of color, a depth of understanding that shows in the way she composes a panel. The border of water lilies and serpents that she painted on the new temple has been completed and admired. Akuhun, who does not give praise lightly, told her it was good. Just that, good. But from him, it was everything. Now she has been given a larger commission. She is to work with Kawil on a project that combines both their skills. A painted stucco panel for the interior of a temple chamber that records a series of astronomical events, the movements of Venus over a specific cycle, correlated with important dates in the city's calendar. Kawil will provide the data, the dates, the numbers, the positions. Iksak will translate them into glyphs and images, creating a visual record that is both scientifically precise and artistically beautiful. They work together in the cool mornings, in the same workshop where Iksak first learned to shape stucco. Kawil reads from his bark paper calculations, calling out numbers and dates. Iksak translates them into glyph blocks, first sketching lightly on the prepared surface, then building up the forms in plaster. They discuss each element, the placement of a number, the orientation of a glyph, the relationship between the text and the celestial diagrams that will surround it. These discussions are sometimes practical and sometimes philosophical. Kawil wonders aloud why the Venus cycle and the solar year align so neatly, and whether this harmony was intentional, whether the gods designed the cosmos according to mathematical principles, or whether the mathematics is simply how humans perceive a beauty that transcends numbers. Iksak suggests that perhaps it is both, that beauty and mathematics are not different things, but the same thing seen from different angles, the way a sculpture looks different from different sides, but is always the same sculpture. Akuhun, passing through the workshop, overhears this conversation and smiles. He does not add anything. He does not need to. His students are teaching each other now, and this is the best kind of teaching. The kind that happens when two minds, each carrying a different piece of the truth, come together and find that their pieces fit. The old master is tired these days. He moves more slowly. His hands, which once shaped the finest stucco in Lakamha, tremble too much now for detailed work. But his eyes are as sharp as ever, and his memory is vast. He spends his mornings reviewing the work of his apprentices, making corrections so subtle they are almost invisible, and his afternoons sitting in the shade of the gallery, sometimes dozing, sometimes watching the play of light and shadow on the palace walls with an expression of quiet wonder, as if seeing them for the first time. He knows what is happening, of course. He can feel it in his body. The gradual loosening, the slow release. The Maya do not fear death the way some cultures do. Death is part of the cycle, the great turning that makes all life possible. The maize god died and was reborn. The sun dies every evening and is reborn every morning. The old year dies and the new year begins. To resist this turning is to resist life itself. So Akuhun does not resist. He watches his students. Iksak most of all, the one who reminds him of himself at that age, that same fierce attention, that same love of the line, and he knows that when he is gone, the knowledge will continue. Not all of it, perhaps. Some things die with the person who carries them. But the essential things, the shapes, the stories, the understanding of what makes a line alive, these will be passed on. They were passed to him by his teacher and to his teacher by another in a chain of hands and eyes stretching back to the very first person who pressed a finger into wet clay and made a mark that meant something. K'inich Kan too feels the turning. She is older than she was a year ago. She feels it in her knees when she kneels at the metate, in her shoulders when she reaches for the high branches of the garden. But her garden has never been more productive. The soil, enriched by last year's compost, is dark and rich. Her maize seed, carefully selected from the best ears of the harvest, is stored in dry clay jars, waiting for the next planting. Her honey has been traded for cotton cloth and jade beads, small luxuries that please her, and her beehives are healthy, the bees buzzing with their own inscrutable wisdom, going about their work with a dedication that K'inich Kan respects and identifies with. She has been watching Iksak and Kawil with a knowing eye. She sees the way they look at each other, or rather the way they carefully do not look at each other, which tells her everything. She has lived long enough to recognize love in its early stages, when it is still more wonder than certainty, when two people are still discovering the shape of what is growing between them. She does not say anything. It is not her place. But she remembers her own husband, dead now these many years in the early days of their own discovery, and she holds that memory gently, like a smooth stone in her palm, warm from the sun. And so the year comes full circle. It is a dry season evening once more, perhaps February, perhaps March, and the sky above Lakamha is clear and vast and filled with stars. Let us visit the observation platform one last time. Kawil is there, as he so often is now, and tonight Iksak is beside him. They sit together in comfortable silence, watching the sky. Venus is in the west, Noek, the great star, burning with that steady, almost defiant brightness that has fascinated human beings since the very first night a human being looked up. Below them, the city is settling into sleep. The fires in the courtyard homes are burning low, their smoke rising in thin columns that dissolve into the dark air. The palace is a great pale shape in the starlight, its tower a dark finger against the sky. From the jungle, the frogs and insects have begun their nightly chorus, that vast, layered, gentle roar of life that is the voice of the living world. Somewhere at the edge of the city, K'inich Kan is in her home. The fire in her hearth is banked for the night, the coals glowing softly. She lies on her sleeping mat, a cotton blanket pulled up against the slight chill, and listens to the sounds of the night, the frogs, the distant water, the rustling of the thatch as a small breeze moves through. Tomorrow she will rise before dawn and kneel at the 3 hearthstones and blow the fire to life and begin again. The maize will be ground. The tortillas will be made. The garden will be tended. The cycle will continue. In his quarters near the palace, old Akuhun is also resting. His room is small and simple, a sleeping mat, a low shelf of codices and bark paper manuscripts, a clay cup of water. On the wall, barely visible in the darkness, is a stucco relief he made many years ago, a portrait of the maize god, young and beautiful, rising from the earth with corn leaves sprouting from his head. It is the finest thing he has ever made, and it is the last thing he sees each night before sleep takes him. He looks at it now, and the maize god looks back, and there is a understanding between them, a shared knowledge of cycles, of endings that are beginnings, of the great turning that carries all things. And on the observation platform, K'wil and Ixsak sit together under the wheel of stars. They do not speak. There is nothing that needs to be said. The sky says it. The slow turning of the constellations, the patient journey of Venus across the dark, the river of the Milky Way flowing overhead like a road of light leading somewhere beyond imagination. The year has turned. They are different people than they were when we first met them. A little older, a little wiser, their skills deeper, their understanding broader. But the stars are the same. The cycles continue. The great wheel turns. And that is perhaps the deepest thing the Maya understood. This people who watch the sky with such patience and precision, who built their cities and their calendars and their art around the rhythms of the cosmos. They understood that everything is connected, that the movement of Venus and the growth of a corn plant and the shaping of a glyph and the love between two people are all expressions of the same underlying order, the same great pattern that was set in motion when the gods placed the 3 stones and lit the first fire at the beginning of time. The frog chorus rises and falls. The stars turn imperceptibly above the sleeping city. The jungle breathes its warm, damp breath, and the water, the big water, the Lakamha, continues to flow through the heart of the city as it has always flowed, as it will always flow, carrying with it the sound of everything, the grinding of corn, the chanting of priests, the laughter of children, the quiet scratch of a brush on plaster, the slow and patient counting of the days,